That brings me to the last category of projects that I'd like to discuss, which is basically what we call social infrastructure. And we all know that a piece of infrastructure, like a factory or a power plant, like the factory where BIG is located in Copenhagen, the Carlsberg factory, a power plant, or in this case, a dry dock where they used to build ships. Once they get decommissioned, you can change their use into something social or cultural. In this case, we were invited next to Hamlet's castle, Kronborg, to design the Danish Maritime Museum. The idea was to basically convert the dry dock into a museum. We came up with the idea of turning the dock inside out to basically preserve the dock by framing it with a museum underground. You have 3 bridges, one that stops the water from coming in, one that connects to the castle, and then one that gradually slopes down into the museum. And the museum visit becomes like this sort of continuous descent into the maritime world. The architecture is really the encounter between the old and the new, the heaviness of the dock, the lightness of the steel. The steel is made in a shipyard, just the same way you make ships and lift it into place. This anchor chain is actually a tension cable, so the floor that you're walking on is hanging in the roof above you. So there's no scenography, there's no theater. It's really everything you see is a hard-working part of the building. You have the auditorium, where the seats for the grown-ups continue under the stage and becomes the seats for the kids. As you sort of zoom out, and you know, not only is the inside of the building part of the cultural space of North Copenhagen, outside, because of the hard walls and the open sky, it has amazing acoustics. So the dock has really been transformed into this new cradle for the cultural life of Elsinore, simply through reinterpretation. This is this sort of inverse Titanic moment. So if a piece of infrastructure can become a museum, then maybe a museum could go the other way. This is a building we're building right now in Oslo, in a sculpture park, where we were asked to do a small art museum. We could place it anywhere we wanted, and we suggested, why don't we make it a part of the journey through the sculpture park, so it becomes a bridge. You walk through the sculpture park, you arrive at the museum, you go through the museum, and as you go through the exhibits of the museum, the skylight becomes a panoramic window of the neighboring dock, and then you sort of continue your journey, and you suddenly find yourself on the other side of the river. So you can say it's like a hybrid between a museum, a bridge, and a sculpture. You can almost see it as the biggest sculpture in the sculpture park. From certain angles, you might not even think of it as a building, but more as a really large artwork. But at the same time, it is the museum, and it is also what gets you over the river. We broke ground last winter, and it's going to open next summer. So, of course, there's different ways of reinterpreting existing functions. I think one of the things about social infrastructure that excites me a lot is that with new technology and with clean technology, we can somehow reimagine the notion of a factory or a power plant. One of the projects that we're about to finish in Copenhagen is a power plant that turns waste into electricity and district heating. It works on an economy of scale, so it's going to be the tallest and biggest building in all of Copenhagen. It's right next, it will replace the power plant you see here, right next to the marina, and right next to Copenhagen Cable Park, where the locals go water skiing. So we thought, how can we make a huge power plant so it doesn't become just a big ugly box that blocks the views, casts shadows on the neighbors? And we thought, maybe skiing. In Denmark we actually have snow, but we have absolutely no mountains. apparently we have mountains of trash. So we have to go 6 hours by car to get to Branäs in the south of Sweden. Because of the size of the power plant, we could actually put 2/3 of Branäs on the roof of the building. So we proposed in the competition to turn the entire roof into an alpine ski park. You might have noticed that Denmark won 0 medals in Sochi. We hope to change that, because now we can actually, or soon, we can practice at home. It's also going to be a public park with hiking paths. You can climb the hill. It's for free. It's a public park. You can enjoy the views over the horizontal skyline of Copenhagen. You'll have the tallest climbing wall in the world, 100 meters of danger. And you can maybe say the diagram I showed in the beginning, which portrays this idea of a city or a building as an ecosystem, is quite close to coming true here, because not only do we harvest local resources, we use the water that falls for the park on the roof, we have daylight in the factory, we have natural ventilation, but also together with the citizens of Copenhagen, their waste comes back as heating and electricity. So this was our first artistic rendering. This is what it looked like maybe a year ago. So it's really sort of becoming part of the geography and the landscape of Copenhagen. Maybe a new landmark together with the mermaid. So this notion of social infrastructure, we took it maybe one step further. When we moved to New York 8 years ago, shortly after, 3 years later, Hurricane Sandy came and wiped out all of Lower Manhattan. And we got invited to look by the Obama Sandy Recovery Fund to look at how could we protect Manhattan against the next storm surge. And we thought, well, how can we do it so it doesn't become a flood wall that segregates the life of the city from the water around it? And we thought maybe sort of inspired by the High Line. The High Line is basically a piece of decommissioned infrastructure with social and environmental programs added to it after the fact. So we thought, what if we could actually design the resiliency infrastructure of Manhattan? So it comes with premeditated social and environmental programs for the people living there. So we came up with this idea, and we suggested to the city this very simple method, that we would take all of the necessary hard engineering that is needed to protect Manhattan, and then we would design it, co-design it with all of the resident communities along the waterfront of Manhattan, so it actually became something that would both protect the city from flooding and also make the waterfront more enjoyable and more accessible. And so we call it the dry line, essentially the High Line that's going to keep Manhattan dry. And we've made a short film about it that I'd like to show.
That was actually why Sandy was so bad, is because of the phase of the moon, it was already a very large high tide, as well as the storm surge coming in with the wind and the tide lining up perfectly to give us 14-foot tides instead of 8-foot.
The most shocking part of Hurricane Sandy was the fact that it exceeded expectations.
I think the sheer magnitude of it caught a lot of people off guard.
When Hurricane Sandy came, we were not prepared at all. I mean, not even the slightest.
Yeah, it was like an alien invasion of water. And not the good kind of water.
So yeah, I mean, it came right in front where there was literally boats on 14th Street floating in front of our window.
We had a sub-basement level office a block from here, and it was totally covered in water for 2 days. So we lost everything. Everything.
We're really concerned about another storm and the flooding that's possible, and we think that the next time it's going to come even further inland.
I'd like to see some type of flood protection in this area. That's going to happen. We're vulnerable, obviously, being this close to the water.
Something that just brings like more different walks of life, you know, another escape from just the busyness and the hustle and bustle.
There's this great space that could really become community space, cultural space, and active uses.
Everyone enjoys space, and in New York and other congested cities, it's hard to come by.
Anything that makes the cities greener is just such a wonderful thing for not only the environment, but the people that live in the city too, to be able to be around that space.
The plans, the berming, the sense of how it can become into the natural landscape itself, how we want to program that is really the next challenge. We are the link, we're the tip in the sense of the big U. It's important that the entire waterfront of Lower Manhattan build in the plans that have been put forward, because we can not only fortify this great city of New York, but be a model for cities all over the world.
Thank you. I need my slides back. Perfecto. Thank you. So that brings me to the last thing that I'd like to share tonight. Because I mean, of course, at least now we zoomed up into a scale that's the entire city of Manhattan, or the city of New York, which is a mouthful for an architect. But one of the interesting things that that have occurred, and I think as all the professors in this room can testify, as an architect, it's very hard to shape your career because you can't just call up a mayor or the director of an opera house and say, I'm going to design your opera house. And this is how I'm going to do it. You have to somehow wait until someone needs something so much that they're willing to pay millions of euros for it, that somehow coincides with the vision that you have of the future. And the last 18 years, we've been sort of doing a handful of projects all around the planet. And we've been trying to sort of combine, maybe you can turn the lights a little bit down on me. You can try to combine a lo mejor puedes bajar la luz un poquito en mí para que no molesta la planeta. We've sort of worked all over the planet, and as you can see, like, there is a sort of a thread going through our work, the notion of hedonistic sustainability, social infrastructure, architectural alchemy, design evolution, form giving, pragmatic utopia. But the one thing that conditions all of these projects is that they're all governed by the laws of physics of planet Earth. So a year ago, we got invited by the Dubai Future Foundation to look at what would it look like if we would create a human city on Mars. A good question could be, why Mars? And there's a really good reason, because if you look at the whole solar system, it's one of the smaller solid planets, roughly similar in size to the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, have similar qualities, but unlike it's obviously our most immediate neighbor in the solar system. You can get there in only 3 months, because the orbit of Earth and the orbit of Mars, which is 2 times longer, they coincide every 2 years. So every 2 years you have a 3-month window that actually allows you to get to Mars in only 3 months. You'll be traveling with 50 million kilometers, or you'll be traveling 50 million kilometers. Elon Musk has announced that he wants to do it maybe in 2022, maybe in 2024, with an unmanned mission. And just to give you an idea, like, it's somehow rooted in our DNA as human beings that we migrate. And if you look sort of since we started arbitrarily 700,000 BC, where we believe that man got fire. And basically, throughout our sort of history as human beings, we've been traveling either because of new technologies, new like different natural events like climate change, or different sort of innovations in navigation or movement. So 300,000 years ago, it is believed that we started moving out of East Africa because we now had fire and fur coats, so we could live in colder climates than East Africa, which is where we're from. 65,000 years ago, we sort of managed to invent small boats, so we actually made it all the way to Australia. Then there was a recess in the Ice Age, so we could start moving up into Europe. Then we were pushed back by a new onset of an Ice Age, which pushed us further to the east. Then finally, the last Ice Age ended, and we could get all the way to Denmark. Then there was this in-between time where the water levels hadn't risen enough yet, so you could actually walk from Siberia over to Alaska, and then in the next 10,000 years, we managed to conquer the entire world. So 10,000 years ago, we had been practically everywhere on the planet. And just sort of to see, 2,000 years ago, it took 3 months to cover the entire Roman Empire by horse. 500 years ago, it took 3 months to sail from Spain to Brazil. 150 years ago, 100 years ago, you could sort of circumnavigate all of Eurasia in a train. Let's say 60 years ago, you could fly with like 8 stops. You could get to Australia. Now you can do it in one single flight in 16 hours. And if Elon Musk gets away with it, you can do it in 39 minutes with a rocket. In the 60s, it took us 103 hours to get to the moon, and now we're back to Mars. It's going to take 3 hours, 3 months. So basically, 500 years ago, it took us 3 months to get from Spain to South America. We can do the same trip to Mars in the same amount of time. So Mars is not as inaccessible as you would think. Just by comparison, to get to the moons of Jupiter is 2 years. To get to the moons of Saturn, it's 4 years. So Mars is a pretty good guess. Also, when you look at temperature, you can see some planets like Venus, it's like steaming hot, and it has an atmosphere made out of sulfuric acid. You know, obviously Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto freezing cold, minus 233 degrees, even for a Scandinavian, that's a bit tough. But Mars, actually, the summer in Mars at the equator, it's 20 degrees Celsius. That's like a Danish summer. Of course, it gets a little colder, twice as cold as on Earth. Also, the gravity is quite nice. We have 1 G gravity on Earth. We have 38% on Mars. So that means that a big guy weighing 100 kilos, he would weigh 38 kilos on Mars. A 3-month diet from 100 to 38. By comparison, he would weigh 253 kilos on Jupiter. So that means that, of course, our steel beams can span longer. All our materials are stronger. Also, it has a quite light pressure. 1% of Earth's atmosphere, which is a little bit of a challenge. But the alternative, being on Jupiter, it's like being 10 kilometers below the sea level at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. So like a crushing pressure. A light pressure, which is, I think, the weather is much milder. Wind speeds a fourth of what they can reach on Earth. Also because the atmosphere is so light. And then I think the coolest thing is that the day on Earth is obviously 24 hours. It's the same on Mars, except we get 40 minutes extra every day. I think everybody could like snooze just an extra 40 minutes on Mars. That's reason enough to go, I think. And then also the seasonal tilt, and just by comparison, one day on Mercury is 175 days. So when the sun sets, it takes 92 days before it rises again. So we're really lucky with Mars. And the other thing is the seasonal tilt. The axis of the Earth vis-a-vis our orbit around the sun is what gives us our weather. That's why you get more sun in the north in the summer. You get more sun in the south in the winter. Mars has exactly the same tilt, so that means that it has the same seasons as us. They're just twice as long because the year is twice as long. Earth has a magnetic field, Mars doesn't. And this is important because it's the magnetic field that protects us from radiation. So when you sort of evaluate, this is almost like a real estate analysis of the solar system. And you can see Mars is pretty goddamn good. The only problem is the radiation. Obviously Earth has twice as big radius as Mars. But because Mars has no oceans, they have the same amount of real estate, 150,000 square kilometers. Obviously the blue planet, the red planet. But this is interesting, and I hope we all will experience this one day. We all know that sunsets on Earth turn red. On Mars, because of the fine-grained dust in the atmosphere, only blue light penetrates the atmosphere, so the red planet actually turns blue at night. It's almost like poetic reason to go. And we've actually been going ever since the 60s. We've been going to Mars. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter has given us very detailed knowledge. We've seen ice on the surface. We've seen the poles. The poles consist of ice and frozen CO2, what we call dry ice. They expand and contract with the seasons. We've seen craters, lava flows. We've seen dried out archipelagos. We've seen landslides. We've seen dust devils, or like whirlwinds. And we've actually had, if not boots on the ground, then at least tires on the ground. We still do. So we have a lot of first-hand footage sort of showing these images. This is morning frost seen in the 70s by Viking 2. This is a mountain range submitted by Curiosity only a year ago. And actually you can see, this is the Atacama Desert in Chile, that there are actually places on Earth that look very much like Mars. And it's no coincidence because the resources are the same. We actually have a lot of coal, we have quite an amount of water, we have iron ore, we have different metals, the exact same minerals we have on Earth. So the only difference between the two planets is that the atmosphere and the biosphere. But maybe we can change that. So a lot of great things about Mars, a handful of challenges. Too much radiation for humans, but not too much for plants. Too low pressure, too low temperatures, no breathable air, and no ready-to-use water. So there's a few challenges. One of the things that inspired our thinking was, this is Robert Zubrin, a NASA scientist, talking about Roald Amundsen, the Norwegian that found the way to the South Pole for the first time. And what he did differently was that he started learning from the Eskimo how to live in the Arctics and the Antarctics. So instead of bringing big ships, he brought small boats. Instead of bringing horses, he brought sleigh dogs. He brought kayaks. He brought harpoons. So he was living off the land So he didn't bring his Western civilization to the Arctics. He brought a vernacular that is fitted for the Arctics.